You know that feeling when you see someone at the gym, at the airport, at the coffee shop, wearing a Rolex? And for just a second, you think, how? How does that person have a $10,000 watch on their wrist while you're still debating whether to renew your Netflix subscription? And then the real question creeps in. Could you ever get there? Should you even try? Well, that's exactly what this video is about. Because in 2026, Rolex just crossed a price threshold that changes everything. And the answer to who can actually afford one is going to surprise you and probably frustrate you. Before we get into the numbers, let me ask you something. When did a watch stop being a tool for telling time and become a financial flex? Because here's the truth that's going to sting a little. Rolex just raised prices for the 7th year in a row. And as of January 2026, the entry-level Submariner costs over $10,000 for the first time in history. Meanwhile, the median American household saves roughly $3,000 a year. And when you do the math, it's genuinely staggering. Let's start with the actual prices, because most people have no idea. The cheapest new Rolex you can walk out of a boutique with today is the Oyster Perpetual, about $6,200. That's the entry ticket. Want the date just? The classic dress watch you see on every LinkedIn profile photo? That's $9,150 at retail. The Submariner, the one everyone actually wants, just crossed $10,050. And the Daytona, the holy grail of steel sport watches, $16,900 at retail. Which, by the way, you almost certainly can't get at retail anyway. On the gray market, a Daytona runs anywhere from $31,000 to nearly $39,000 for a single watch. Here's where it gets interesting. Rolex sold a record $14 billion worth of watches last year, and someone is clearly buying these. But the question is, exactly who? Now, here's what the data actually says about the average Rolex owner. Surveys put the typical Rolex buyer at an income of $100,000 to $150,000 a year. And a UK insurance study found the average Rolex owner is a 68-year-old man, with only 1.5% of owners under 35. That last number is worth sitting with, because if you're in your 20s or 30s watching this, the Rolex is being marketed to you relentlessly, but statistically, almost nobody your age actually owns one in any financially sustainable way. Think about it this way. The median U.S. household earns $83,730 a year. The personal savings rate right now sits at 3.6% of disposable income. That means the average household saves about $3,000 a year. An entry-level Oyster Perpetual eats 2 full years of savings. A Submariner, 3 years. The Daytona at gray market prices, you'd be saving for a decade, assuming you save nothing else. Here's what nobody talks about: the real affordability test. Financial advisors have a few rules for luxury purchases, and none of them are flattering. The strictest is the 1% net worth rule, meaning the total you spend on luxury goods in a year shouldn't exceed 1% of your net worth. By that logic, to responsibly buy a $10,000 Submariner, you need a net worth of at least $1 million. A $15,000 gray market Daytona, $1.5 million. That's not being paranoid. That's just math. Even the more relaxed version, the 5% income rule, says the watch shouldn't exceed 5% of your annual salary. That means you need to be earning $200,000 a year before a Submariner makes sense. And most personal finance experts add a prerequisite checklist on top of that: 0 non-mortgage debt, a 6-month emergency fund fully stocked, and at least 20% of your income going to retirement. All of that before you even look at the boutique window. The Federal Reserve's data shows median net worth for Americans aged 35 to 44 sits around $135,000, and 13% of adults have 0 emergency savings at all. Let that sink in. Let me show you exactly how this works with the opportunity cost. Here's the math that actually should keep you up at night. Let's say, instead of buying a $15,000 Rolex, You invested that money in an index fund averaging 10% annually, roughly the historical S&P 500 return. In 10 years, that $15,000 becomes $38,906. In 20 years, it becomes $100,913. In 30 years, it becomes $261,741. That's not a typo. A $15,000 watch becomes $250,000 if you just leave it alone for 3 decades. The Rolex doesn't do that. And that's before you factor in what it actually costs to own one. Rolex recommends a full service every 5 to 10 years, which runs $800 to $1,200 each time. Watch insurance adds another 1 to 2% of value per year. Over 30 years, you're looking at $24,000 in total ownership costs. The math is brutal. But wait, isn't a Rolex an investment? I know what you're thinking. You've seen the TikToks. You've heard that Rolexes hold their value, that they outperform stocks, that they're the one luxury you can justify. And here's the uncomfortable reality. That was partially true, and it's no longer the full story. Between 2010 and March 2022, the average Rolex resale price rose 739%. The Submariner went from a few $1,000s on the used market to trading at double retail. But in 2022, the bubble burst. Price dropped 31% in less than a year. Anyone who bought at the peak is still underwater. The gray market has stabilized, but it's sitting roughly 22% below its 2022 highs. Let me be real with you for a second. If you bought a Rolex in 2018 and held it, you've probably done okay. If you bought in early 2022 because everyone said it was a guaranteed win, you've lost money. The era of Rolex's printing returns like an index fund is over. Now, here's your brain working against you. There's a concept in psychology called the hedonic treadmill. The idea is that humans return to a baseline level of happiness regardless of what we acquire. A landmark study tracked lottery winners and found they were no happier than the average person just months after their windfall. The excitement of a new purchase fades, and with material goods, it fades faster than you think. Research consistently shows that satisfaction with things we buy decreases over time, while satisfaction with experiences actually increases. What does that mean for the watch? Within a few weeks of putting it on, it becomes background noise. It's just your watch now. Your brain has recalibrated. And here's the cruel part. Instead of feeling satisfied, you start noticing the next model up. There's also the status signaling problem. Studies show people buy luxury goods partly as social signals, proof of success, proof of achievement. Rolex literally uses the tagline, "A crown for every achievement." But research found something uncomfortable. The person wearing the luxury item sees it as a signal of accomplishment, while observers more often perceive it as snobbery. The signal you're sending isn't the signal they're receiving. The financial rules say you need $1 million net worth or a $200,000 plus income before a Rolex is a responsible purchase. Not because watches are bad, but because the opportunity cost is enormous and the psychological payoff is shorter than you think. Subscribe for more videos like this.